Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of a 3-part series all about record triggered flows for beginners. If you haven't checked out part 1 and 2, feel free to go back and check those out and follow along. We are building off the same flow. However, you don't necessarily need that flow project to do part 3. In part 3, we are going to be looking at scheduled paths and utilizing subflows within a scheduled path. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, give the video a like if you enjoy it, and we're going to jump straight into this thing. Now, if you haven't already opened up the flow project, go ahead and do that now. And if you're creating a new one, just have a record trigger flow that fires on either create an update or at least update, and you'll be able to build your scheduled path off of that. We're going to go ahead and add our scheduled path in on the flow we created. So to do that, we're going to go up to the start element. You can add a scheduled path right here. We're going to select add scheduled path, and we can name this whatever we want. So we'll just call this let's call it 1 day follow-up. And this is your time source. So this is what the field that everything is based off of. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to base this off a case last modified date, because the scenario I'm working off of in my mind for this is if you have a high priority case that's not responded to within 1 day, I want an email alert sent out from the subflow. So we're going to select case last modified date. Now, this is your offset number. Think of this as the numerical value of how much you're wanting to offset how long you want to pause, pretty much. So you can hit 1 here, and this is your offset options. You can do months, days, hours, minutes. For this one, for testing, we're going to do like a simple test to just update the record to show you how scheduled paths work. We're going to do 1 minute after. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, this is last modified date. It's not a date time field. So technically, this scheduled path is going to fire immediately because it meets the criteria. But I just want to verify that this path works, because in debugging mode, it doesn't really look at that criteria, and it'll just flow down the path. So we're going to test it with an active flow before we change it to a 2-day follow-up, or excuse me, a 1-day follow-up. Now, I went in here and added that branch in, and now we're going to want to add in our update element for testing purposes. So we're going to update triggering records, not related records, just like I selected there. We're going to delete that out. Update triggering records, and we'll just call this update because we're going to end up deleting this one out. And we want to update, let's just do the status field, and let's just set that to escalated. And we're going to close it out. We're going to save it, and we're going to activate the flow. Now, I already have a flow here. As you can see, it's sitting in the status of working. I'm going to give it a quick refresh so you can see that it is still, no changes have been done to the status. And we're going to change the priority, which has no bearing on that scheduled path. We're going to change it to low. And with any luck, we'll wait 1 minute, because that's how long it has to wait to meet the criteria. And we'll see if it changes, because right now it's sitting in a status of working, and we need to see if it changes to escalated. So all right, it's been a couple of minutes, and I went ahead and hit the refresh button, and we have our case that is sitting in the escalated status now. So we know that our scheduled path is working successfully. We didn't have to wait a day or two. It fires immediately, and it's waiting 1 minute from the time of the date changing, because it's today's date. So we are going to go ahead and make some updates now. So we're back in our flow, and we don't need this update element. So let's just go ahead and delete that out. And we can go ahead and make updates to our scheduled path here. So instead of 1 minute after the last modified date, I want to change this to 1 day after the case is modified. Now you can think of a scheduled path as the flow is paused and sitting up here in your start element. It's not going to do anything. So anything after this is going to be waiting for the period to do the logic. So after a day or two, it will flow down this path, and you can add in different logic to check your record or do different things. So what we can do is we will need to actually get our case record again, to just reevaluate the case record to make sure that nothing has changed. So we're going to add in a get element here, and we're going to get case. And we're going to base this on the case object and the ID, case ID equals, and you can actually scroll down here and it's going to be the record that triggered the flow and type ID. And that's the case ID. We're only going to store that record because there's only, or one record because that's all we're getting. I'm going to save my work and save it as a new version. So the reason we're having to do this is we're having to reevaluate the flow because it's, think about it, it's been a day, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, you're having this sit out there. So what if the conditions have changed? You're going to need to get that record again from the database to verify what the values are. We've gotten our case record. So in this situation, we're going to do a 1-day follow-up if a case record has not been followed up on, if it's a priority of high. So we need to define what it means that a case has not been followed up on. So let's just say if the case is in a status of new and it's high priority, that means an email needs to be sent out as a reminder that there's a high priority case that has not been worked. Because in this made up scenario, it would need to go into the working status or escalated status to be officially worked or closed if it's been resolved. I'm just going to go ahead and put this into the new status because we're going to need that for later on anyway. We're going to go back over here and let's add in a decision element. And we're going to call this has case, or how about it has high priority case been followed. Maybe I'll just make it simple. And I'll just call this follow-up. And then maybe high priority. Oh, misspelled that. That's okay. And go. And we're going to say follow-up high priority case. Yes. We need yes, follow-up. And I always like to name the default outcomes because it's cleaner for me. No. So if the status, if the case record from the get case from get case here, status equals new, and what else? And we're going to base this off the same thing, case from get case, and this is going to be the priority, and equals, what'd I say? High priority. So it has to be in a status of new and high priority. So when we're getting our case record after 1 day that was last modified, and we're going to double check that it still meets the criteria because we're going to want to do something. We're going to hit save. We got our get case record. We got our follow-up here. So now what do we want to do? We're going to want to call on a subflow to send an email. Now, to create a subflow, we're going to need to actually, you can't create it within this flow builder screen. You actually have to go out and create a separate flow for this. So to do that, you're going to want to be in setup if you're not already. And you can just in quick find, search flow. We're going to hit new flow. All right, we're going to start this one from scratch, and we have a bunch of options that pop up. And to create a subflow, you don't need to have a screen flow. I mean, it could be a screen flow that you're calling on, but we're going to just do this as a auto launch flow, no trigger, because we're going to invoke this from another process being another flow. We're going to hit create. And from here, I kept my other flow up. So what do we need to do? We need to send an email alert if it is in our subflow. So to send an email alert, it's pretty straightforward. They offer different options in the action here. We can hit, email. And there's a send email. If you don't like this, there is options on the App Exchange that are free, like send better email, if you would prefer to work with that. But I'm going to use with what Salesforce provides us with. I'm going to use the send email. And I actually use this very, very frequently myself to send emails. Now, in the latest Sandbox update, they've completely revamped this send email where you can, when you turn like the body of the email on, you don't have to have a resource. You can actually type in what the body of the email, what you want it to be here. But my sandbox here is not been updated for the summer 25 release yet. And you can actually still use resources. And I think it's important to know how to do that and not just type it straight into here. So we're going to create resources. So first thing we need to do is I'm going to create a variable, and we'll call it a variable. It's going to be text, and we'll call this email addresses. You can call this email recipients, whatever you'd like to. And it's going to need to be a text data type. Now, you need to know if you're going to send email one or more emails. For what we're doing, we're just going to send an email to one email address. So I'm not going to mark it as a collection. We're going to hit done. Next thing we need to do is we need to create our email subject. So to do that, you have a few different options. You could use a formula to do that. You could use a text template. Both are great options. I'm going to use the formula for the header, or excuse me, the subject. So I'll call this formula T for text underscore. We'll call this email subject. Make sure you select data type of text. And we'll call this follow up urgent case. And you can check your syntax. Now you see it gave me an error. If you put quotations around this, this will actually format this as a text resource, and you will get a green checkbox saying it's valid. The reason I like using the formulas is you can concatenate. Maybe you want to have certain phrases, or you want to pull in another resource. You can use that. The text template works well for this too, but I'm just using a formula resource to do follow up urgent case. We're going to hit new resource, and we are going to use the text template here. We'll call this text text underscore, oh my goodness, T, and how about we call this text T underscore, and we'll call this email body. And down here you can type, this is the body of the email. You can put in whatever information you want. You can even pull in resources from within the flow, and maybe you want to in here pull something from the record itself. You could do that. You could set up a formula resource that pulls that in. You can do many different things. We're going to leave it as is for testing. We're going to hit done. We've created our email subject, body, and email address. I'm just going to hit save, and we're going to need to name this thing. So what I like to call subflows literally subflow at the beginning with a colon always, and we'll call this send urgent email or case, and add a description if you would like, and we're going to hit save. That's going to get upset at me because we haven't done anything with this send email action element, and that's okay. We don't have to just yet, but now we can actually add all this in. So for body, you're going to select your email body. And this is where you need to identify who you're going to send this to, right? You're going to add in your email recipients here. Now, this is email recipient address list. When you turn this on, you're going to notice that you can add in your simple variable here, and you can just add in the email address variable. Then down here, we have our subject. Same thing, click into it. You're going to add in your formula subject that you created. Now, you may be thinking, well, Ethan, we didn't assign that email address to that collection variable. And you are right. We need to do that. We're going to hit that plus sign, and we're going to go in and do an assignment. And I'll just name this assign email address. Now, the variable we're going to select is email address. And this is where you can add it in. Now, if it's on a triggering record, you could set up like a variable, like a record ID variable, and use a get element. That way, the ID of the case record is passed into this subflow. But in this case, I'm going to hard code an email in, but I will show you how to do that. Get the actual record ID, because I will pass it over. I'm just going to put test at Gmail, but I'm going to spell gmail.com, but add an extra M. You literally can add the hard code that value straight in. Just for education purposes, you could go over here and create a new resource, a formula resource, and you could add email addresses in here, or a collection variable. There's many different ways to do it. So thinking about this though, we've got our body in the body section, email body in the body section, our email address collection variable selected here for our address list. And then down here we have our subject. There's many other options. You can like turn on use line breaks, and then you would set that to true. Rich text formatted body, let's set that to true. You could even use, I think it's up here, the sender. Attach ID, if you're gonna do an attachments, BCC recipient address list, you could do that. There's many different options, and you can look that up as well on what each of these do. I would highly suggest you do that, because it is very informative. The last thing we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called record ID and make it a type text, and just to make it available inside and outside the flow, and don't make it a collection, and hit save. Whenever we create or connect the subflow to our other flow, we're going to be able to pass the case record ID over to this flow, and that way we can use it for different things, whether it's a get element, update element, things like that. As you can see, we're still getting it's upset at us. Provide at least one email address or email recipient. So this is actually a good use case because this is saying address list. So I think it's one a comma delimited list, right? Well, we can turn that off and that deletes it out. So that means we need to add this to actually the recipient address list. So you can actually toggle on the recipient address list toggle here, and then enter in your Verity email address here and hit save. And I believe the send email action will be happy now, which it is. So if you wanted to use the get element to assign an email address, what you could do is add a get element, and you could add your header in, and then we'll just call it get for now. I'm going to delete this out. I just want to show how you can use this. And it's doing the same thing as we did before. It's the case ID equals, and it's going to be the variable record ID. And once you do that, then you could assign in your variable element, or even in here, instead of this being test@gmail.com, you could come in here for the get, and then you could find some sort of email, maybe email address here, and that would add it to the collection for what you're trying to do to send the email. But we're not doing that today. This is just a very simple send email action flow that we're using. Now that we've done that, oh, and you can change the name of your send email action if you'd like up here at the label and API name if you feel the need. Now we've created the subflow, right? To be able to select your subflow in our other flow, you actually have to activate the subflow. That's something that trips a lot of people up. They'll go out and create their subflows and they're like, why can't I select it? It has to be activated to do this. Now let's actually run a quick debug here, and we need to pass it a record ID to do that. So let's just grab the record ID off of this record we have, put it in here, and we're just going to hit run. And as you can see, it ran through and it completed successfully. You can see the email address that was assigned was test@gmail.com. The body this is the body of an email, and the email subject is follow-up urgent case, and rich body and line breaks are set to true. So it was successful, and let's activate our flow. Now I'm actually not going to send the email out. I have the deliverability turned off in my sandbox. We're just going to check that to make sure that the subject and body are populated in our debug logs. But what we're going to do is go back to this flow. So we've activated this one. This one's not activated yet because we need to add in our subflow. But to be able to select it, if you try now to do a subflow, you won't be able to find it, even though it's activated. That is because you need to refresh your browser tab. One of the aggravating things that you have to do within your Salesforce or sandbox sometimes. But now when we select Subflow, you're going to see Subflow send urgent email for case. And we can name this whatever we want. I typically name it the exact same name as the subflow you're calling. The reason why is because it makes it way easier to troubleshoot in the future. Now, you remember we set up a variable, right, called record ID, and we set it available inside and outside the flow with those checkboxes. Well, now, because of that, we can pass an ID in. So we'll turn that toggle on, and we're going to set this to triggering case, and we're going to pass the ID in. And now that we've done that, our flow should run successfully. So I'm going to hit save, and we're going to debug it. So this is our scheduled path. So to debug a scheduled path, up here in the top part, you can actually select 1 day follow-up. And we're going to do this on update of, let's do create. That'll be easier. And we'll select this case record. Now remember, this one is not sitting in high priority, right? So when we run it, our decision element kicks it out. Now let's go over here and update our case, and we need to go ahead and change this to high priority, and it needs to be in new, if you remember what we did earlier. So it's in new and priority of high. We're going to debug it again, exactly the same. We're going to hit run. So as you can see, it ran and met our criteria, right? If you remember, it has to be in a status of new and high priority. So call it on the subflow. So you can actually debug your subflow right here. And you can see this is the record ID that it passed over to the subflow, which is as you can see, is the same record ID, which is perfect. But this is the way you can set up a record trigger flow that has a scheduled path that calls on a subflow to send an email. I know that may be a little complex for some of you if you're especially new to flows in general, and subflows can be very confusing, but they're very powerful, especially in more and more complex scenarios. Scheduled paths are also amazing, especially for, sending email reminders. Maybe you have a task created, and if the task hasn't been closed out in 3 days, then you want to do a scheduled path to handle that, to send an email reminder. But it's a super cool tool. There's also other tools within Flow Builder that you could use to handle scenarios like this, like pause elements and things of that such. But for this video, I appreciate you taking the time to walk through all 3 parts, and I hope you've learned something from this series looking at record triggered flows. So to recap, what have we learned from this series? Well, we've learned how to, where to go to create a record triggered flow, how to have decision elements run based on when a record is created or updated, and we were able to create formula resources that determine that. We were able to change the owner, update a triggering case record, and also update a related record to our triggering record in part 2. And in part 3, we learned how to use scheduled paths and how to use subflows to send an email action. There's tons of great resources looking at the email actions and like how you can add multiple recipients and different things like that. And that's outside of the scope of this video. But I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like. I appreciate the support, and I will see you in the next video.